Welcome back. In this video, we will talk about classical organizational theory. We're still working from Educational Administration, Concepts and Practices by Lunenburg and Ornstein, published in 2011 by Cengage Learning. So in this video, we will talk about what classical organizational theory is. We will discuss concepts of scientific management. We will learn what administrative management is, and we will discuss criticism of classical organizational theory. So before we begin, let me quickly outline major developments in administrative thought. So the first early stage was classical theory, and we're going to cover it in this video today. In later videos, we will discuss, the subsequent stages of development in administrative thought. Those are human relations approach, behavioral science approach, and we will also discuss the post-behavioral science approaches, including emergent non-traditional perspectives, each in a separate video. Okay, so what is classical organizational theory? Really, to understand what it is, one needs to realize that before early 20th century, management was really based on simply experience and common sense, right? There was no systematic um, knowledge or anything, you could read up and learn about management and how to organize your organization, right? So in early 20th century, that began to change, and people started to realize that they need to um, have something more than just experience and common sense. And starting from the early 20th century, two perspectives emerged. Okay, the first perspective is now called scientific management, right? And it is really focused on managing work and workers, right? What workers do at work. All right. Another perspective that emerged from those early stages is called administrative management, and that is related to how we should or could structure our organization overall. Okay, notice the difference between those things. And the first person to actually begin the whole thing of moving away from just, opinion based, experience and common sense based kind of approaches to management was Frederick Taylor. Um, he came up with this brilliant idea that managers should study work scientifically in order to identify the best way to perform certain things, right? So really, that seems quite simple, but at that time it was a revolutionary idea, and more than that, Taylor also formulated four principles of scientific management, right? So he said that first, jobs should be analyzed scientifically, right? Everything should be measured, studied, and the manager should do that as a scientist. Okay. The second idea that he came up with is that personnel should be selected, okay, and managers should be involved in that. All right, that is the second principle. The third principle is that managers should cooperate. They should cooperate with the workers, interact with them in order to make sure that the tasks are performed in the best way possible. Okay, and another idea is the idea of functional supervising. Really, managers should plan, organize, make decisions, whereas workers should perform the jobs, really just work, right? This should be put into context that in the past, before Taylor's propositions, really almost all work and organizing and decision making, all of that together were really on workers. Okay, so similarly, all this really selection of personnel is also like things like including selection and training. All of that was done by workers, right? And Taylor was the first one to say, hey, managers should do that. Okay. And all these principles, all these four principles were designed by Taylor with the ultimate goal of maximizing productivity, right? He himself was originally a laborer in steel industry. So he was observing how workers were working below what they were capable of, and he really um, invented his all these principles based on a lot of observation, a lot of firsthand experience also. Okay, so in contrast to scientific management, uh, administrative management is focused on an entire organization, right? How an organization should be structured and how it should function, right? So big names here are Henri Fayol, Luther Gulick, and Max Weber, right? So let's talk first about Henri Fayol. This was a French engineer and industrialist, and he was a successful industrialist, right? And he is known for, claiming that the success in his company was not because he was such a great person, right? Instead, the success of his company was based on the management principles he used. And so Fayol was generous enough to, formulate all his ideas, and he stated five basic functions of managers, right? So, according to Fayol, managers should be planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Okay, so when you plan, when managers plan, they develop an, I guess more important than those five functions of managers were Fayol's 14 principles of management. Here I list them, and you can read about each of them in more detail in table 1.1 on page 7 in our course book. All of those things, again, remember to put those things into context. So if you think that most of those things are really relevant today, you're right. And imagine how revolutionary and really visionary those people were to put forward these concepts in the early 20th century. Okay, so after Fayol's ideas became kind of, more popular, people started to develop them, right? So there was this guy, Luther Gulick. He developed Fayol's proposed five functions of managers into seven functions, okay? And these seven functions are really well known. So Gulick said that managers should be first planning. That means they should be developing an outline of the things that should be done, okay, and also possibly how they should be done, the method for doing them, right? Second, he said that managers should be organizing, that is establishing a formal structure of authority, how to organize subdivisions, how to define them, how to coordinate them. The third thing managers should do was staffing, really the whole personnel function, select people, train them, develop the staff, and really maintain favorable working conditions. The fourth function of management, according to Gulick, was directing. That is very close to being a leader, really, and involves, making decisions, communicating them, implementing those decisions, and also evaluating how those decisions are implemented, right? The fifth function is coordinating, and that includes all things we do, things people do in an organization in order, to bind together, that are binding the organization together and to achieve a common goal. The sixth function is reporting, which really related to record keeping, researching things and inspecting things, right? Making sure that things happen according to a plan, taking any corrective actions if necessary, and really, uh, you know, keeping, the keeping the your supervisors informed, right? And the final function that Gillick formulated was budgeting, that concerns all things that are related to budgeting. Those things include fiscal planning, accounting, controlling the money. So you see that based on Fayol's ideas, really in this seven functions of management, we see a very comprehensive, systematic, description and a proposition of how what managers should really do. Okay, so the next early contributor to administrative theory is Max Weber. Perhaps you know him. It's a very famous sociologist, a German sociologist. And I think, people acknowledge that his work also contributes to administrative theory relatively late, later, after his death for sure. So people figured out that Max Weber proposed, he was one of his big contributions to sociology and in general to human thought was describing the concept of bureaucracy and its role in our society, right? So people realized that Max Weber's concept of bureaucracy, um, it's based on rational guidelines, and it actually is super relevant for administrative management, for how we manage our organizations. Really, what Max Weber did is he described how it was his perspective of how ideally an organization should be structured in order to be effective. Okay, we're not going to discuss those his ideas in detail. We might be coming back to them in later lectures in our course, but really, one important thing is the ideas, what Weber's ideas about bureaucracy, how efficient bureaucracy should be, and Fayol's 14 principles. Uh, those two big, you know, contributions, they laid the foundation for contemporary organizational theory. Really, they go beyond just the classical, administrative theory, and they many of those things are still relevant and important even today. Okay, so despite the fact that administrative management in general, classical theory, were a breakthrough at their time, and they allowed administrative thought to move forward, at giant speed. Uh, there are criticisms. There were criticisms of it, and here are three main criticisms. So the first is that the classical theory had too much focus on efficiency, right? So all these propositions about how we should organize our people, how work should be studied scientifically, all of those things were really just efficiency focused and ignoring other things. So what was ignored? That's the big second criticism, right? What was ignored were psychological and social factors in the workplace. So if you look at what Taylor, Fayol, even Max Weber propose, those things they might be super efficient, right? However, there's nothing there that could motivate employees, right? And the assumption that they make is that if you pay enough, that is sufficient for a person, for the employee to be motivated. But we know from experience that it is not always the case, right? And the third big criticism is that classical theory, administrative management particularly, has too much focus on the tasks people perform. And there's little attention to the human that is doing those tasks. There's little attention to individuals and groups in the workplace. So, because of this criticisms, a new, approach was developed. It was called human relations approach. It is now known like that. So, we will study this in the next video. Thanks for watching.